Hello, everyone, and welcome to Business Standard Dialogue. Today, we are discussing education reforms in testing times. And we have a very strong panel here with us to discuss all issues related to education reforms. A very warm welcome to all of you. Let me start by introducing who we have with us, Mr. S.S. Mantha, former chairman AICTE and currently adjunct faculty in many universities. A very warm welcome to you, sir. Ms. Rukmini Banerji, Senior Advisor at Pratham Education Foundation. A very warm welcome to you, Ms. Rukmini. And we have with us Mr. Ishmeet Singh, CEO of Central Square Foundation. A very warm welcome to you, Ishmeet. And we have our education correspondent of Business Standard, Auhona Mukherjee. Welcome, Auhona. So let's dive right into it. The NEET controversy has exposed a lot of questions about the integrity of exams, the consequences of a highly centralized and high-stakes selection process that we have, and the subsequent reforms that have been proposed as well. I'd like to start with you, Mr. Mantha. That is the problem really the integrity of examination, or have we created a system where one examination has far too much power on a young person's future? And what does it tell you about the overall education system?
I think there has been most of the examinations in our country are looked at as filtering mechanisms rather than look at the understanding or the knowledge that a person gets. They're more looked at as, having the ability to clear certain examination with certain questions, things like that. So there is some amount of reform needed at that point. Having said that, NEET, whatever happened with NEET is unfortunate. There are, again, two parts to that problem, and that probably answers the question that you had in mind. The first part is fundamentally, conducting a leak-proof examination. Now, which concerns with essentially technology, and there are multiple methods to adopt using technology today. There are encryptions, the entire question paper can be generated using keywords and things like that. So 30, 40 times more than the questions that are needed can be generated. Questions can also be generated on the fly. So a lot of those kind of, interventions can be made. And in the entire supply chain of conducting an examination, right from the beginning point to the declaration of results, a lot of technology can certainly give you almost a Six Sigma kind of, quality levels. And that is technology part. I won't, the time is limited, so I won't go into details of what the technology that can be used. A lot of AI, a lot of predictive analysis, all that can be used. Blockchain technology can be used. So there are multiple technologies, things like that. But having said all that, there is fundamentally something that is required in terms of our approach to examinations. Instead of asking, how can we conduct examinations better? Probably it's time to ask, how can we reduce the dependence on high stakes examinations? So therefore, just to highlight 3-4 instances, one, we could have a quarterly, national examination. Suppose we have just 25% of the syllabus in each of the examination, and a student can take it 4 times. So you have smaller syllabus, reduce the stress and things like that. Or one could even have best 3 out of 4 kind of examinations. One can have modular examination. Why should have one give physics, chemistry, biology, mathematics, mechanics, everything together? They could have, credit-based approach where individual papers could be given at different points of time and so on. And the exams could themselves be held multiple times, like JEE mains is held. There are a lot of advantages in that. The best score counts can be taken in and things like that. So my view is somewhere we need to democratize even the examination systems that we have, the patterns that we have, and reduce the stress levels by reducing the importance of the examinations per se.
Yeah,
And it should get into continuous evaluation, continuous assessment, smaller portions,
yeah,
reduce the stress, and make the testing so that knowledge is tested rather than the ability to retain information.
yeah.
So
That's very,
probably all this together can, make life a little easy.
yeah.
So some of those reforms have to come in place. There are many other reforms which look at the employment perspectives, which actually are related to downstream activities like examinations and so on.
So we
Thank
will
you.
come to that. Some very interesting points that you've made, and you've talked about how examination exercise itself needs to be relooked at. I'd like to ask both Rukmini and Ishmeet. Rukmini, why don't you start by telling us? So when you look at the whole NEET phenomenon, millions are preparing for one exam. There is so much parental pressure. Years of coaching goes into it. What does it tell you about what we have made education all about?
I think it's always helpful to look a little bit behind and then come up to the present.
Yeah.
And I feel like there are underlying demographic trends in the country also that need to be taken into account. Very simple, few back of the envelope, very broad calculations. If I use, let's say census, the last census numbers, yes, they're a little bit old, but every age group in India, let's say, is 25 million. 25 million 6-year-olds, 25 million 10-year-olds, just for the sake of
Yep.
a broad argument.
Fine.
If I look at the data from, say, 2008, 2010, about enrollment in 8th standard at that time, that's just 15 years ago, it was something like 12 to 13 million, which meant that those of even if everybody started in 1st standard, only about half reached 8th. That number today, or in the last few years, is closer to 23 million. Massive shift. This is one of the most, I would say, big changes that has happened in the education system, that you can say the right to education, or that time period in our country's life. Now everybody goes well beyond 8th. And
Yeah.
so many families in which it's the first generation going beyond elementary. Depending on how this is all measured, they go well into secondary, and then therefore you're pushing against the next frontier to go forward. So the demographic push is immense, and I would say brutal at that stage, because then you're competing for probably a much fewer set of opportunities. Our elementary schooling system has, if I put aside the question of quality, provision has expanded to keep up with this demographic push. And that is now pushing up against the higher levels as well. Then we have these, as Mr. Mantha was saying, this filtering system, where perhaps the going through that goalpost is still very constricted, which has now led to all kinds of ways of trying to succeed to go through that goalpost, coaching and all kinds of other things. And I put actually coaching, paper leaking, all as part of the phenomena that is very competitive, and somehow I have to make it to the other side. And behind me, there is more and more waves of people coming. So that is, I think, the demographic picture that we must take into account. That is our demographic structure. Now, if I go further back, I would say that along with this, massive increase in schooling at every level now, we all know from many years of our own, of everyone's work and of the ASER reports and other data, that the level of learning and the level of schooling has not kept up. So you have, let's say, in 3rd standard, only about, depending on where you're looking, maybe a 30% who are at grade level.
Yeah.
And it is that 30%, of course, the denominator is, the actual absolute number is big, but it is now going through the system. So you're arriving in maybe at the beginning of high school, still quite weak, and with a very over-ambitious curriculum that you have to handle, and more or less past primary school. And I would say, hopefully we'll get a chance to talk about primary later. There is no effort to help those who have not picked up in the first round, to help to catch up. Hence, rote learning, mugging for exams, all of that is a natural consequence of the fact that I can't cope with what is put up in front of me. And some way, I think that this end point, like Auhona was saying earlier, that what happens to me in 10th or 12th has a big shadow on what happens to me below. So pretty much after primary school, I think focus becomes kind of exam oriented, syllabus completion oriented, get through it in some way. As I think Mr. Mantha was also saying, exam taking becomes more important than, learning in different ways.
Yeah.
So I really think that while this crisis was very unfortunate, but it helps us think about this whole thing as a continuum, not just as an endpoint or a transition point. And some of the positive things that we have seen, and I think Ishmeet will agree, in the early years show that systems can change. And there is a lot of promise, and there's been progress in even in the years after COVID in the early grades, because many different things have been tried. So hopefully, I feel like there is examples within our own education system of things changing for the better, business as usual being replaced by innovative means. That is still happening many, many years below the age group that we are talking about. But it's the same system, and it's the same
Well,
continuum.
if we are talking about education reforms, I don't think we can do without addressing the foundation years, the primary that you talked about. We will come to that. Ishmeet, your thoughts on the same, but also because Rukmini talked about the whole issue of demography, it really strikes me that we have child from a well-resourced family and a child from a government school sitting for the same exam and being assessed in an identical manner. Do you think we have equal opportunity for children the way we are designing our education system right now? If you can touch upon that as well.
Yeah, clearly answer onto that question, Ruchika, is no. And I would like to bring another aspect to what Rukmini ji said to this whole examination part. The examination we are talking about is a very high-stake examination.
Yeah.
Because of another inherent aspect, of course, some aspect has already been brought out, is the fact that the career options, which make this examination very high stakes, are the only option people know about. Engineer, doctor, yeah, UPSC. And these are the examinations which suddenly become super high stakes with all the points which Mr. Mantha and Rukmini brought out.
Yeah.
This becomes a big one because everybody wants to cross over there, and everybody coming with the learning crisis which Rukmini said. So the pressure comes down to the last few years. Pressure comes around in the systems, the parent, everybody, leads to corruption and leads to other means. I think so. That's where it starts. I mean, the quality of education, the kind of exposure that children need to have. People in government schools, private schools also, the new career options coming up, they need to be educated on that stuff. It can't be left on the mercy of their own discovery. And I think how we actually improve the exposure of our children to these options. And mind you, they're learning anyway through the internets of the world and everything.
Yeah.
And somebody yesterday was telling me that in Bombay slums, the newest career option, they want to look at designing, but they don't know how to do it, how to actually get into something which can allow them to do designing.
Yeah.
So I think that's where it starts off. That what are we really teaching the children in the classrooms? How do we really improve the classroom practices and classroom learnings for them to actually get exposed to the real world? It will no doubt help in the whole school to work transition, which Mr. Mantha was talking about, but at the same time also helps them prepare for life in general. I mean, the fact that primary school and the middle school are the critical years where the child is learning to read and reading to learn, both in those first 15 years of his education life.
Yeah, learning for the sake of the learning as well.
Absolutely.
Auhona, you heard all our panelists have really pointed out to some very interesting things and issues that have to be addressed. We have seen the anti-paper leak bill that's passed in Lok Sabha as well, and the committee that has been formed by the government headed by Nandan Nilekani looking into education reforms. Can you tell us what is the status and what is the government thinking on addressing all these concerns that we have just heard, for instance?
Right. So largely the changes that we've seen have been announced till now. Obviously there have been the shifts in leadership in terms of new secretary being brought in, a new minister being brought in, and in terms of policy there has, like you said, this committee has been formed. But what we know so far is that this committee is primarily going to focus on examinations, how to use technology to make it stronger, how better to handle logistics so there's no leaks in the entire chain of how the exam papers are made and then finally delivered. So it's mostly this back end sort of approach so far that we've seen in terms of public announcements, which are essential. Even the anti-paper leak bill amendments, they primarily pertain to stricter jail time and higher fines. But these are all more reactive, which is also the broad sense that I get from attending other such webinars where I'm part of the audience as a reporter. So several people are of the opinion, and that's what we are also seeing and hearing, is that a lot of changes also need to be brought in along with these within the education system itself, and not only what happens when a paper leaks. So we'll see how it goes and what more is being done. But so far, this is what we know.
Proactive approach. Mr. Mantha, do you think we need to go back to the state system? There is often so much conflict that happens between center and state. So when it comes to education, do you see merit in the idea of going back to the state system?
No, though, if you look at the provisions within the Constitution, the education is in the concurrent list. And therefore, normally the policies and the directions, they come from the center. And the implementation part, based on the state's requirements, it happens at the state level. Now, going back to the state, it's first of all conducting a 25 lakh or 30 lakh students one single exam, and then driving them to do or die kind of situation is really not tenable anymore. What requires to be done is cut the numbers, increase the examinations, make it more enabling and things like that. But having said all that, today we also need an education reset. It's not just the examinations, like Auhona said. And we are also not talking about rejection of NEP. That's a good document and it should be implemented. The education system must move away from the degree-based, examination-centric learning to something that, builds knowledge, it builds skills, creativity, employability, entrepreneurship, some value education, things like that, And with a lot of AI coming into our everyday life, it has also come into education in a big way. So AI will demand the fundamental redesign of teaching, assessment, curricula, and things like that. So universities should fundamentally become employment, enterprise, innovation, research, commercialization, things like that. So unless there is a whole lot of thinking on these activities, the downstream activities of the university, apart from teaching, learning, and then examining students. Now, given opportunities are limited and the supply side is very large, so therefore we are reducing all our examinations to filtering mechanisms. You set a more difficult paper so that we get only certain number of people passing from that, so that the demand side pressure is reduced. So these kind of things eventually will lead to a lot of distress, a lot of heartburn, things like that. So therefore, apart from examinations, how they should be conducted, a lot of technology must be used. There are a lot of avenues available using technology, making it leak-proof. Examination is a promise to the student. If that promise is broken, it becomes a breach of trust. So therefore, we need to look at these things and create an overall education reform system, not just examinations per se, because they come and go.
You've talked
The larger system remains.
You've talked of technology, and you cited the example of JEE also, from which I think some learnings can be taken. But do you think this will require a lot more investment to do this kind of automation? Why have we not been able to replicate that in other exams?
No, the most of the educational policies that have come right from 84 have spoken about 6% spend of the GDP on education, but on ground it's much lesser than that. So investments must happen. Education must get the priority because the younger population is growing, is large in numbers in this country. And for them, if the right avenues are not provided, there will certainly be reaction. So therefore, what I feel is the necessary investments must happen. At the same time, we have a very robust education system, and that must be strengthened further. It's only the logistics which require a little bit of tweaking and provide multiple opportunities on the demand side, where you increase opportunities for employment, get the MSME sector to participate in a large way. MSMEs today provide almost 30% of your GDP. They provide
Yeah.
almost 40% of your manufacturing. So strengthen that, provide opportunities for self-employment so that instead of providing 1 million jobs, you provide opportunities for setting up, in the MSME sector, multiple, opportunities, and if each of such startup provides 10 employment opportunities, then you see the numbers that grow. So it's not, unless we connect the employment to our education, the real reforms will not happen.
Rukmini, you talked about coaching institutes also cropping up. I know you deal with school education, but at school level only this whole coaching phenomena starts. So this whole dependence on coaching, what does it tell us about our quality of education? They've created like a two-tier system. So should we just accept that coaching is just required? It's a market demand, or something needs to change?
Yeah, I think that, just like when we speak about manufacturing or about industry, there is many types of establishments that are there.
Yeah.
Very simply put, if you look at the map of India, you can look at any of the ASER reports, we have these maps in there. Western and Northern India has what we call private school. So 50% of children in states like Rajasthan or Punjab go to something that is called private school. I'm talking about school education, and coaching is there, but it's in much smaller numbers. Private school as such is very low. You look at West Bengal, you look at Odisha, you look at Bihar, and paid class outside of school is very high. Okay. So I think these are very similar things. There is a investment to be done outside of whatever is being publicly provided. And I think that needs to be, and again, remember, I'm not talking about your quotas and your Akash coaching. I'm talking about what happens from class 1 upwards.
Yeah.
I think that I look at this coaching business as in two ways. One is there is very high, we should not discount parental aspirations for a generation who is the first time going beyond 8th standard. You want to do whatever it takes for your kids to succeed because you did not have those opportunities. And like Ishmeet pointed out, my perspective on what is a good job out there may be coming from the 1960s and 70s and 80s, not coming from 2026. So there is a massive parental aspiration, one form of which is to say, let me do whatever extra I can for the kids. The second one, I think, is if you look at who goes mostly to tuition, it is actually private school children go to even more tuition. Okay. Now, if you were, and again, I'm talking about large scale rural areas. Why are the top schools in Delhi, top elite schools of elite parents, need the support of coaching?
Yeah.
Again, because you feel any competitive edge to get my kid to that next level. So at many levels, I feel the coaching is that additionality that you give no matter where you are, because you feel that in this very competitive world. Now, if you go deeper into what happens, and again, I'm sure the world of coaching for 10th and upwards is a very different world. I'm talking about, and the coaching that exists in very competitive. We did a study of 3 panchayats in Bihar. Bihar is a massive tuition and coaching state from beginning to end, okay? I think children go to coaching even before they are born, okay? So, okay. In these 3 panchayats, we surveyed every student 9th to 12th. 90% were in some kind of a coaching situation. In that coaching situation, they were taking and paying fees for multiple subjects. Nobody was doing only English coaching or only math coaching. The impact on the learning levels, we were there because we wanted to understand if this adds to your pretty weak, low, foundational stage. no impact, almost very negligible impact on those who are well below grade level. Maybe the impact on the top guys to become from excellent to very excellent may have been there, but very negligible. So it's sort of like you feel like, 20 years ago, going to school was a thing that you did. Now you feel like going to coaching. So this coaching business from young age to an older age needs to be also understood better. I think it's a very variegated picture.
Yeah.
I'll just tell you one last thing. I was in a school in Begusarai district in Bihar last week, and the school had 800 enrollment. And this is hot on the waves of Jantar Mantar and everything else. They have the attendance in school that day was maybe 200, 250. Most of those were from 9th and 10th. There was hardly anybody in 11th and 12th. So I said, बच्चे कहाँ हैं? So the teacher said, 3 तरह के बच्चे होते हैं. जो पढ़ाई में अच्छे वो तो कोटा चले गए. जो मिडिल लेवल के हैं, जिनके माँ बाप के पास पैसे नहीं है, वो हमारे गांव के कोचिंग में जा रहे हैं, और बाकी बच्चे घर में, बिकॉज उनको ऑलरेडी तय हो गया है कि ये रास्ता उनको कहीं नहीं ले जाएगा. Now, if you know this, then what do you do for each of these segments? Because these are segments.
Yeah.
They are segments of economy. They are segments of learning. And
there
this
is
segment. And again, last thing, I don't want to take up more time. When I ask the teachers कि आपकी सबसे बड़ी कठिनाई क्या है? She says, जो बच्चे मुझे मेरे पास 9th में आते हैं वो कमजोर हैं. तो मैं
Sorry, say that again?
The kids who are coming to me 9th, they are coming weak. So where from 9th to 12th or 9th to 10th am I going to take them? I have to take them there. They are here. So really the problem is beginning.
Yeah.
I mean, so I think these are some of the realities that we have to think about as we think about what improvements to bring in where.
Yeah. Ishmeet, Rukmini just talked
Yes.
about the whole parental aspiration, and of course
Yeah,
the
yeah.
foundation is something. I also want your views on the same question. I think you have given some ideas. Please go ahead.
Yes, I am, because what Rukmini has opened up a Pandora's box. I think it also, if I just turn the mirror around, I think there's a very simple question you asked about why are children going outside the schooling system. Is because the schooling system is still not being held accountable for the learning outcome. Yeah, what should the child learn in grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, grade 4, grade 5, grade 6? It should not be just because he has to go from one school class to the other. Yes, the schools are getting accountable, being held accountable for the infrastructure, for the bathroom hai ki nahi hai, which are all very important, of course. But the most critical thing is about, when you talk about quality, is about learning outcomes. Are the teacher and child engaging in the right thing? I think Mr. Mantha referred to the fact that because the actual competency-based learning is not happening, that you are ended up building a pressure at the later stage. Rukmini talked about the fact that they have to look outside because somehow schools are not being held accountable for learning outcomes. I think that's where I have been lucky enough never to go to a coaching, because simply speaking, I found great teachers who were actually interested in my learning. My parents who were supporting me in my learning, because that is what really helped me learn. I mean, if that can happen to a person like me, who was an very average student most of the career, but the fact remains that that's because my parents were holding the school accountable. Now, do the parents even know? I didn't come into your point. Do the parents even know what is my learning level of supposed to be? The mother knows that my child must have motor skills, must start walking at the age of 1, must be speaking mama, papa, and all that stuff. But does she know that in grade 1, he should be reading a paragraph or, identify letters of the language or do simple mathematics? She doesn't know that.
Yeah.
So the learning visibility is extremely poor, and that's why now the schools are not getting accountable. Our education system is not getting accountable for the learning outcomes.
One of the important things that we touched upon briefly, I want Mr. Mantha to please talk about it. We're talking of learning outcomes. We're talking of learning for the sake of learning, the classroom experience. But a lot of time, what it boils down to is jobs. And a lot of anger, perhaps, that we have seen in the youth is to do with the lack of jobs as well. So how do you think education needs to align itself to this particular reality, that it needs to create jobs and make our youth job ready?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very important aspect of any learning. Ultimately, people need a job for survival, need a job for, all other the society's requirements. One of the important parameters which exists there is a good, reasonable employment. Now, given the situation in the nation, I personally feel the not one sector should be looked at. Certainly not technology alone, though I come from the technology space. Technology alone cannot provide you all the jobs. So it needs a combination of labor intensive manufacturing, distributed services, MSME entrepreneurship, care economy, and of course, new age AI based technology enabled jobs and so on. And while saying that, MSME plays a very important part in our nation, at least. MSMEs and micro enterprises, they have millions of jobs which small businesses, suppliers of service firms, and so on. So, like I said, labor intensive manufacturing, construction, education, skilling, creative economy, these are all very good points to start with. Now, the 2026 employment strategy that the government has, it identifies animal husbandry, and identifies your high value agriculture, textiles, and so on. But then the bigger point is, why should we be thinking only about jobs? The real objective should be to create at least 10 million new economic activities, not merely 10 million jobs. That's what I referred to earlier. Like, for example, a large factory which employs about 10,000 people is certainly useful. But then 1 lakh enterprises creating them, employing 10 people each, will generate a different ecosystem. And that's what spreads across the nation, and that's what is required. So there are a lot of jobs, a lot of data to support all this that I'm talking about. And therefore, looking at the connect between the education that we have and the employment sector that we have. This must happen. It has a uh, very big impact on what happens downstream in our colleges, in our universities, in our schools, things like that. So it's not only degree that I'm interested in, but the hands-on skills that can fetch me a meaningful assignment
Yeah.
and a
So
good salary to depend on.
we have 15 minutes left, and we have 2 audience questions as well. And of course, some closing remarks also we'd like from our panelists. But before that, because I have another journalist colleague on the panel, Auhona, is there something that you'd like to ask any of our panelists before we move on to the next segment?
Yeah. So I'd like to throw this open to the panel, whoever would like to ask, or maybe each of you could give me a few words on what
But
you think
please
of
keep
this.
your answers brief.
Yeah. So my question is regarding the use of AI in education, because I know this is the buzzword now and we are always talking about AI, but we are seeing increased use of AI across all levels, from university right down to primary schools now. So how do you view the increasing use of AI in education, and what should we be doing differently, if anything?
Ishmeet, you want to take that first?
No, I think that's a great one. We have some fantastic solutions coming up in AI and EdTech, and I think the time has really come for help for institutionalizing that to complement the school education system, not to substitute it, to complement it, which will not only require the government and the schooling system to learn how to procure these solutions, but also how to make them a part of the process as well as institutionalize them, which basically means in the classroom by the teacher. How does this solutions come in? There are many use cases which AI is actually opening up: AI coach, teacher coaching, supporting teacher, home learning, classroom learning opportunities, etc., guiding the teacher. But how do we really enable the learning process for the children and make it a part of that schooling system will be critical.
Rukmini, would you like to say something on the same?
Yeah, I agree with Ishmeet. But I think that I'll just give you an example. Every day, I'm sure all of us I get at least 10 emails saying, here's a product, here's a process, and AI is going to solve your life. To date, I have not received any mail saying, what is it that you want? What is it that you're struggling with? So I do feel that a couple of things that we in Pratham are working on, a bottom-up approach where you really look at what is the challenge. Challenges are different for different teaching situations. and building solutions right as part, as Ishmeet is saying, an integral part. It's not a thing that is dropped on it or retrofitted, but what is it that I can use as part of my regular teaching and learning that adds, not subtracts, not substitutes. And we have some very good examples. One, for example, teaching English. We have often teachers and students who are learning English together. This is a very different teaching learning situation than typical subjects. So we've had, for example, a whole series of experiments of I'm writing down for exams, I have to write my answers. But the correction of those in a way that I can learn very quickly, often my teacher is not able to give me. But I've seen cases in one of our programs where when this is done, both the teachers and the students are actually picking up quickly, and AI is an equal partner, or in fact, in some ways a leader. In the exam, I'll have to write it myself, but all in the practices I can see. So a bottom-up approach that can lead to some non-linear solutions is what I think AI presents, but it's up to all of us to demand that the AI solves my problem and not the edtech maker's problem.
Absolutely. Very well put. We'll take two questions. There's a question by Rajas. What is your opinion about the coaching industry, especially the one that caters to studies for entrance exams? They inflate the cost of studies, and how can this be stopped? Mr. Mantha, is there something you'd like to take this?
Just to react on the earlier one, the best teaching happens in a classroom with a teacher in the classroom, and the best, even better than that would be one student, one teacher kind of, but then that is difficult to get here. So therefore you have one teacher and multiple students and so on. Now here is where technology helps, but then assuming that AI has all solutions for every kind of problem doesn't really work out. So it certainly helps. There are learning management systems which help in understanding the student's profile, their pace of learning, and giving interventions at the right time and so on. All that is happening. But then assuming that using AI, I can become a good learner or a good, it's not going to work. It must be a combination of both the teacher and some adaptive tools that are there. As far as coaching is concerned, it's rampant. In fact, there are schools, there are colleges which admit students for the sake of presenting them before the examination system, which requires that. But otherwise, the entire learning happens in a coaching class. So they probably even have requisite arrangements with coaching classes and things like that. But that's the unfortunate part. We need a more democratic system. So in that, the better endowed people would move forward, the others would be left behind, things like that. But again, the whole thing comes down to a supply-demand kind of equation. If we assume that there are 1 lakh medical seats for where 25 lakh students appear, it shows a mismatch. So somewhere we need to correct these things. And the net result of that someday could be better teaching in schools, better teaching in colleges, and less dependence on coaching classes and things like that.
We have 5 more minutes. I'll take one more question. It's by Sudhir Kirloskar. He's asking, how can people busy with their daily life challenges who can't come to the road to protest on every issue pressurize government machinery to have enough accountability on key and basic issues such as education? Or has India entered a no hope, just pray to God mode? He's really very, very harrowed. Anyone in the panel who would like to take this? How do you pressurize government machinery?
I'll take it. I'm not sure how to pressurize government machinery, but I think in the last a few months, we've seen that there are many modes of expressing what you feel. I've been very, like all of us, looking at what has been happening on social media, but the variety of voices and the types of ways in which people have expressed themselves, somewhere that whole aggregation has made a difference.
Yeah.
I think we've been particularly impressed, I'm sure all of us, in the different ways in which young people have been able to, put forward their thoughts. whether it was in a protest mode or in a demanding mode, I've
Yeah.
been very impressed with the creativity. I mean, I wish there was some way in which you could categorize all the different creative modes in which people brought messages to the front. So certainly to your audience member, we need God, we need Claude, but we need ourselves as well to be
We need
able
God,
to.
we need Claude, yeah.
No, I think that you need to have. I think that again, technology offers many more ways of talking to each other, talking to people, like-minded people in other places, as well as to everybody else who's listening, who may not be like-minded, but may change their minds about what they're hearing.
So in the last 5 minutes, if we can go to each panelist, and can you tell us very quickly, what is the one reform you would implement on priority if it was in your hands? Let's start with you, Ishmeet.
I think for us, for me, this moment is really to reflect on all the entire education system and bring the focus back into the classroom and the classroom practices where actual learning has to happen, and hold ourselves, the government, as well as the schooling system, ourselves, I mean the parents and the community, and the government and the schooling system, to the learning outcomes we want our child to have at every classroom. I think that's the opportunity, which would mean time on task. How do we get technology in there? Everything. Thank you. Yeah.
Rukmini, you talked about primary schools. I wonder, what is the one thing that you think we should implement on priority?
So, our name is Pratham. So we've been doing Prathamik, Purva Prathamik, but I think now the new frontier is middle school. Starting from age 10, grade 6, I think there's lots of things we could do about what to learn, what to teach, how to do it, how to involve families, how to involve communities, and how to really look ahead to a world which is changing very rapidly. So I really think high priority to rethinking middle school will take us along the pathway to solve some of the things we are seeing at the end of high school.
Mr. Mantha, you've talked a lot about exam reforms and technology. Given the situation we are in right now, if it was in your hand to fix the testing system, fix the education system, what is the one thing that you would do first?
No, a lot of thinking must go into the skills that the students would ultimately get. And can we connect those skills to meaningful jobs? So the entire reform process must follow that supply chain. Thank you.
Thank you so much to all the panelists for joining us today and for the wonderful insights that you have shared. I think there were some really, really interesting, important points made by everyone on the panel. Thank you, Auhona, for bringing in AI into the discussion. Today, there is no discussion is complete without you discussing AI. As Rukmini also said, we need God, and we need human approach as well. Thank you so much again. And I hope you enjoyed this discussion as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.